question, please feel free to throw it. And Paul, notify us in case we miss any question. So a little bit about us. We've been married for the last 18 years. We have 6 lovely children. We've got a 16-year-old, a 14-year-old, also a 16-year-old boy, 14-year-old girl, a 12-year-old boy, a 9-year-old girl, a 6-year-old girl, and a 3-year-old boy. So 3 boys, 3 girls. As you can tell, our house is action-packed. We have been homeschooling for probably, we normally say for 16 years. I mean, we say for as long as we've been parents, we've been home educating, and we'll tell you why in a short while, why we say that. So we'll just take you through an overview. I think first, let me just make a few opening remarks just to clarify a few things. One, we are not experts, Paul. As much as we've been home educating for a while, we also have a lot we are still learning. Secondly, we're not a perfect couple. We're not a perfect family. We have many of our own mistakes. So we don't stand here on a pedestal. We're here just to share our experiences, and they might be limited, might be useful. And then the other thing is that we'll make a couple of disclaimers. I know we've been asked to come and speak about homeschooling. You'll hear us using homeschooling and home education interchangeably because they are normally used interchangeably. We'll do some definitions in the slides, and we'll take you through a bit of statistics in terms of to understand what is the situation. So we'll just give you an overview. We began with we've been doing it for a while. I must tell you, when we started, there were no Catholics that were homeschooling in Kenya. Catholic homeschoolers, we've only started discovering them very recently. So we had been homeschooling in an environment where we were mainly surrounded by our Protestant brothers and sisters, whom we thank very much because we've had a support system. We belong to an association of homeschoolers. Statistically, right now, there is no solid data to show the number of homeschooling families. The last time that, if you look at even Wikipedia and all that, they say over 500 families in Kenya, but there could be more. And majority of these families are majority of them are Protestants, and for various reasons, which will come to that in a short while. So I don't know if my wife has anything to add. So allow me now to just take you briefly. I'm happy to see all the members of St. Paul here. And somebody has mentioned whether there's a recording. I think that is already there, Paul. I've seen it on the chat. So just wanted to confirm that what you need to do, Paul, on my side, I'm still not able to share my screen. So you need to go to you need to give me the powers. And that is, you have to go to the security and allow for me to share.
Try it again, try.
Well, thank you very much, Paul. The powers have been shared peacefully. So we'll just make a few comments and a few remarks as we share. So a little bit about ourselves. We'll just introduce ourselves. We have studied, these matters of marriage, education, and family, we've studied them from a university in Catalonia in Spain. We indicate how long we've been home educating. We've had the privilege, good people, of attending 2 global home educators conference, one in the US and one in Germany. It's amazing. We have met so many families out there of all shapes and sizes and creeds and religion and race, sharing the same common passion of wanting parents to be the primary educators of children. It's been amazing experiences. We've learned a lot by being in those places. My thesis, the one I did a master's thesis on parental rights to homeschool. So I have studied the Kenya Basic Education Act 2013. That is what was the basis of my study. So I'll be sharing a little bit about that. We've already mentioned how long we've also been preparing people for marriage, my wife and I, for over 15 years now. And the rest we already know. We have a company we run, which is called Pied Piper Services, which is mostly a people development company. We do a lot of programs to develop young people, character development, character education, and many of coaching, consulting, training, and all other things. So Structurally, we'll just take you through briefly what it is, why Catholic home education. You must be asking yourself, I mean, there's home education, but why Catholic? And you'll be surprised. It's very unique. When you say Catholic home education and you want to go that way, it means something very different. Now, why parents choose to home educate, we'll attach a little bit of that. We'll speak about the common challenges or issues that are raised against homeschooling and answer them briefly, and then we'll open it up for questions. So on the screen right now, we basically put the definition. So those of you who've been, and I think it's important we start by saying this to the entire community, all of you lovely people listening to us. Homeschooling or home education is not for everyone. And there are certain prerequisites it needs for you to be able to be a home educator. So even if you listen to what we say and you say this is not for you, you shouldn't feel bad. Because the reality is that home education is a viable education option like any other. A parent who chooses to take a child to a private school or a public school, and a one who chooses to educate their child at home has equal rights. And each of these opportunities are viable. And if there's any church that has been supportive of homeschooling for many years, apparently, is actually the Catholic Church. And I'll be showing you in a short while a couple of documents that support what the Catholic Church has said in terms of homeschooling. So what it is educating children at home. This is key, as the word says, or at a variety of places other than school, other than a private or public school. What makes it unique is that it is usually conducted by a parent, a tutor, or an online teacher. Though the responsibility, please note, and this is what makes pandemic schooling different from homeschooling or home education. A lot of people say they're homeschooling, but they're not really homeschooling because they're not directing the education of their children. The content of what the child will learn has already been determined by the school. You're simply a supervisor to make sure that the child meets the milestones. That's not homeschooling. That's pandemic schooling. That's very different. Homeschooling is crazy, and people who choose it take the risk to be the ones that will direct the education. What does that mean? That the parent could either be the direct educator of the child, or the parent has a direct say in terms of the content the child is taught and the aim of the education. This is very important. This is what defines home education. Now, some of you are listening to me, even if you choose not to go the homeschooling way and you're in a child in a public or private school, I think this session will also be good to awaken in us all as parents the awareness of our central and primary role in the education of children. The sad reality we face today is that too many parents, unfortunately, have absconded this duty and have relied on schools or other institutions to generally play that role without any interest, without bothering what goes on there. And we have no idea what is being taught and how much influence is being made on our children's minds. So the right and duty to direct education, as I said, actual teaching, all that, curriculum selection, tutor selection, determination of ends of education, alignment of education to the values and convictions. In other words, a homeschooling family chooses to home educate and to choose curriculums or education content that is aligned with their philosophy, with their values and their convictions. That's very important to distinguish. So when we're talking about home education, please note that's what it is. So this is what I enjoy. I love this part very much, this definition, because any of you who's Catholic and has heard of the Scott Hahn. Scott Hahn is a famous figure now in the Catholic Church because he was a Presbyterian minister and then he converted. They've been homeschooling for a long time. His wife has written an amazing book. I'll be sharing the title at the end of my slides. And she defines Catholic education uniquely. And I love this because what makes education Catholic or not is its foundation in the fullness of the Catholic faith. And the degree to which the faith is integrated into the education of the whole person, mind, heart, and soul. You might listen to that sentence and wonder, what does it really mean? Let me put it simple. Today's education that you go into a private school or public school, or many of these education systems you go to, religion is just a subject, many times optional. But in home education, and especially Catholic home education, your faith is not a subject on the side. Your faith influences and directs everything you learn, whether in subject of math, in science, in biology, whatever it is. The Catholic faith is imbued and integrated. In other words, it is the beginning and the end of whatever you're learning. And I'll be telling you how, because there are curriculums that are Catholic that help you achieve this. So please note, what makes education Catholic, home education Catholic, is that it's founded on the fullness of the Catholic faith. In other words, you can't just take a bit of the Catholic faith like you go into a supermarket and say, I like this bit of the sacraments, but I don't like this bit of the church and what it teaches about reproductive health, which is what happens now. But the beauty of Catholic home education is that you teach your child to grow in the faith and to understand that the Catholic faith is so universal, so whole, that there is no way it contradicts science or any knowledge. In any case, it illuminates and guides all knowledge that we have. That's what makes Catholic home education. And of course, true education, according to Vatican II, it's a document called Declaration on Christian Education, has to be directed towards the formation of the human person. In other words, true education is not about papers, academics, certificates. It is about raising a human being who eventually will spend eternity with God. And if the education is not doing that, then it's not true education, because it's not helping the person grow in totality. The human person is complete. Education has to develop the mind, the heart, and the will of a person, and to develop a character that is aligned. Any true education has to be aligned with God's eternal law. It cannot go contrary to that. Then it fails to meet the deepest need of the human person. These are very important statements I'm making, because fundamentally, a lot of the problems that have existed, and one of the main reasons why a lot of home educators, majority of them, choose to home educate, is because they want an education that really encompasses this richness of teaching the whole person. Paul, if you could do me a favor, if you could kindly admit people as they come in, so that it keeps coming on the screen, and then it makes them the screen lock. So if you could kindly help do me the favor of, as people come in, you could just admit them. Now, this is a very interesting statement coming from the Holy See. If you're wondering where the Holy See is, of course, we're talking about Vatican, the very central place where the church's authority sits. Speaks about 250,000 Catholic schools around the world assist parents who have the right and duty to choose schools inclusive of homeschooling. Please note, and they must possess the freedom to do so. And there's the reason why the Catholic Church says this is because they've noticed the worrying trend of state intrusion into parental rights, the state taking up and usurping rights that belong to parents. All of you are aware of what happened somewhere in Western province. It's a reality of what I'm talking about, where you have a child who's given a family planning without the consent of the parents. And you can have a head of a union of nurses with the arrogance to tell parents to shut up and that the child is within the government's project. That gives you an idea of what we are talking about. There's been a worrying trend of the state taking up powers and wanting to control education at the expense of the rights that belong to parents. Please let me remind you, good people that are listening to me, I bring up children to the world. My choice, my decision to educate the child is not a right that the state gives me. The state's job is only to respect, to facilitate, and to recognize it. But sadly enough, the Basic Education Act 2013, which I wonder how many of us parents have read it, does not stipulate that, and contravenes the Constitution in many, many ways, including the fact that the state has been given so many rights at the expense of parental rights, which is very worrying. That concern should not only be for homeschoolers, it should be for any good willing parent. Even you who's in a private school or a public school should begin to get worried when the state begins to take up roles and positions or rights or freedoms that belong to parents. And therefore it takes up the role of deciding what is best in the interest of your children and removes the role of the parent. And partly this is the reason why the church has been at the forefront of protecting the rights to homeschool. And I think it's what I've mentioned here. So this is, now I'm going to mention a few points from the Catholic Church. The popes have written amazing things. And that's why as a home educating family, we are so assured and confident that we're not doing this thing as a weird thing. This is not a strange thing. It's got the full support, prayer, backing of the Catholic Church. The choice we have of homeschooling is enshrined within our constitution, even as a country, despite the fact we're now thinking already of changing it 10 years later. Our rights are enshrined in international law, in human rights. They're all there. If you go and read the Charter on the Rights of Family, that was a document presented by the church, if you read all the rights of parents, you will see there. And it says, we are bound by the most serious obligation to educate our offspring, and therefore must be recognized as the primary and principal educators. The parents' role in education is so important that only with difficulty can it be supplied where it is lacking. Now, please note that is the only exception where then the parents' role can be given or delegated to a different authority. But the church has always been very clear, the primary and principal educator. By the way, please note, in the Basic Education Act, the parent is not even recognized as an educator. That even gives you an idea of how limited the thinking is and the philosophy behind our Education Act. Because that failure to recognize that a parent is an educator is a serious misnomer and a serious limitation. Now, why do we say this? Education is not limited to schooling. Education doesn't happen in the confines of buildings. Education is something that happens throughout. And schooling is only a small component of actual education. Education encompasses moral, religious, character formation. For us as home educators, we are not confined to timelines. When a child is born in the family, it's an opportunity for the children to be involved in the rearing of that child. They also learn biology on where the child came from. When we go shopping, it's a time to learn how business is carried out, to also learn how money is exchanged and how to do math and when to get change. But this right it's important, parents, if you're listening to me, to understand that this fight to return back the primary and principal role of parents as educators is not only a preserve of home educators. It has got to be your concern listening to me today. Because if we don't fight for it, then what will happen is slowly the state, and as it's already been doing very well, then usurps that role and can introduce any curriculum that it wants, can influence our education system, can influence the content that is taught to children, and you'll have nothing to say. What are some of the reasons why people choose to home educate? Here they are. Mostly majority of home educators, I think you can see the big one there, is concerned about the environment in schools, bullying, schools where maybe too much striking or an unhealthy, immoral atmosphere. I mean, today, most of you now are aware, schools have now introduced LGBT agendas. There are books that are being sneaked into the curriculums. This is concerns that have made many homeschoolers choose, you know what, I would rather protect my child and take this up. See, that's what a homeschooler chooses. There are many other reasons, including sometimes it's a child who has a physical or mental need, or a child who's introverted, they are bullied in school, they never fit, or the education system doesn't recognize the talents of that child. And therefore a parent decides, let me take that child and let me harness the talents of this child. For information, the Serena Williams, who are world-known tennis players, were actually homeschooled. That gives you an idea of what I am talking about. So moral instruction, religious instruction. Today, there's something fundamentally wrong with the way education is carried out, because education has gotten to the point where it has vested interests. People who drive education have an agenda they want to drive. Always remember that as a parent. And because of that, the aspect of fighting to remove religion in education has been a long-fought battle and has been successful in many ways. So today, unfortunately, many of our children will grow up without necessarily seeing the connection between their faith and science or reason. In any case, many of them are being taught that science and faith is an enemy to science and reason. When you home educate, you take the onus and saying that I'm going to raise my child to integrate their faith and to understand there's never been any contradiction between faith, reason, and science. So let me make a few points here. It's not for everyone. And I think we said that at the beginning, but notice it is a viable and legitimate choice like any other. So never ever look at home educators as mad people or weird people. No, they are good intentioned parents who have a deep desire and love and a desire to be part and parcel of their children education in a different way than you choose. And therefore they need to also be recognized and respected in that way. In other parts of the world, the homeschoolers have gone further to even ask for the state to finance homeschoolers. We will soon get there. But here in this part of the world, we are still far from there. I'll show you at the end of my slides, just the state of homeschooling globally. Now, homeschooling, it is also not a guarantee of success for your children. Please note, some people think that, now you bring them with the Catholic faith integrated, they turn out to be correct, they'll never sin. No, 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 no. Remember, they have a free will. They can make mistakes like anyone. It does, and it still remains on how you create the atmosphere in the home. A prerequisite for successful homeschooling is a home that is bright and cheerful, a home where people really respect each other. There's peace, there's harmony. If they're the parents there, they are really committed to their vows. They really live their vocation well. And there's a genuine love and desire and interest for people. People are accepted for who they are. Those are important conditions for home education to happen. Otherwise, if a home lacks that, it is a toxic environment. So it's rather that child be in a private or public school. So please note, it's not just a magic atmosphere that you wake up and you know a home educator. There are many prerequisites you need to go through. It's also home-based. We will mention this is customized to meet the child's and family needs. This is one thing very important to understand. People who choose home education have an interest to pay a lot of attention to the needs of the child. And eventually, therefore, they notice their talent and therefore direct the content towards developing that talent. And also the family needs. One of the benefits of home education has been documented in a lot of research work is the rich family life. The fact that the parents are able to spend quality time with their children. And even sometimes people wonder, how can a parent separate themselves and be also an educator? It's very possible. You'll be amazed that the first condition of any education is actually love. And who can be more loving than a parent? Though you might be limited in certain technical abilities, that still doesn't stop you from directing. There are enough resources that home educators get out there. Today, with the internet and the virtual world, there are many resources, there are many online tutors. And even as home educators, we organize ourselves to be able to outsource certain skills. Our children here, for example, have a love for music. So our children go to the conservatoire, the music conservatoire, to learn music. But we also ensure that our children are involved in, they're not just closed up in a house and don't think they just live in a utopian world. They're involved completely in the community. They will be involved in helping out in a children's home. They will visit, they will be part of a church community. We have a parish we are part of, actively involved in youth. They will be involved in clubs for boys and girls where there are children from other schools. The neighborhood itself provides them an opportunity to also meet other children and play with them. But remember, the most important socialization actually begins at home. The ability of your children to know how to respect their parents, the ability for your children to know how to live order, to care for the needs of others, to look out for others. That is the most important socialization you need, not the one people are putting in our heads that is conformist, that you come out and be like everyone else. We are determined to raise leaders, children that can challenge the status quo, children that will not take anything they're given just as gospel truth, but can use their heads. Now remember, it is recognized, it must be recognized, provided for and supported by the state. Now, this is not a favor that the state does to home educators or to parents. It is actually deeply enshrined in the Constitution. And as I mentioned earlier, my master's thesis raises the concern that the current Education Act 2013 contravenes the Constitution in many aspects. Rights that have been given to us by the Constitution are then taken away subtly and cleverly through an act that is an Education Act. And coincidentally, when people were clamoring for the changes on this act, it was so sad. Many people just only focused on protecting their schools and retaining the ownership of their schools. But the biggest battle they failed to understand, the biggest battle we needed to fight for, was to ensure that we enshrined the right of parents to be the primary and principal educators. So therefore, remember, education choices are up to the parent. You brought the child to the world. And even that parent, you'll be surprised, even in the village, is amazing. Is an amazing natural educator. Most of us, by the time we are going to school, we've already been taught how to talk. We know how to tie our shoes, probably, maybe can go to the toilet, where that is all still part of education. And so therefore, what I'm presenting to you is that I'm saying that at the very heart of home education has been the challenge, the pushback and the challenge to say, you know what, education is bigger than just confinement into schooling, buildings, and within timetables, but it encompasses much more. Now, those of you who love resources, these are like the Bible of Catholic homeschoolers. The book called Homeward Bound is written by Kimberly Han and Mary Hasson. Is actually any question you need about Catholic homeschooling, how to do a schedule, whatever is all there. And then the other one called the Catholic Homeschool Companion is the one that talks about practical ways that different families have shared about how their daily life looks like. I'd probably like my wife to give a little bit of insight in terms of how a schedule of what it means to be a home educator. By the way, for information, my hero is her. She does the bulk of the education. And that's an important thing to note in home education. Ideally, the best is always to make sure that at least one of the parents takes up the ownership to be at home to educate the child. And that means that then there's a sacrifice that then you give up one income to be able to meet this condition, and it's useful. Now, maybe Hedaya can share a little bit about. Okay, maybe from the questions we'll be able to get that. We'll be sharing our contacts at the end. This was slides that we had used earlier. I want to just show something regarding the state of homeschooling globally. And some of you might be wondering, it's not a strange thing being done by a few people. Always remember, before the colonialists came here, we were all home educated. I think we forget that. We forget that very much. That before colonialism happened, where were people going? Where did they learn? We learned many things. Right now, we have an opportunity to be at home with each other. It's a chance for the children to be able to see their parents and what exactly they do, what work they do. So generally speaking, globally speaking, that's the state of homeschooling. In some countries, it is absolutely illegal, especially in countries like Germany, Scandinavian countries, where you see red, illegal. You cannot, if actually you're caught homeschooling, you're actually jailed. That's how bad it is. Kenya falls under loosely legal. We say loosely because when we put the Education Act to be looked at by constitutional lawyers, two constitutional lawyers, they both confirmed that as far as they are concerned, once they've looked at the act, homeschooling then is illegal by the way they analyzed it. Why? Because one, the current Education Act does not mention homeschooling as an option, as a type of schooling, which then that is a very serious omission. Then it goes on ahead to say that any parent who does not take a child to any of the schools that it has listed will be put in jail or fined. And then they define what a school is. And in the definition, exactly, and who a teacher is. And in those limited definitions, they leave out what a parent then doesn't fall within that qualification. Because remember, most of us have come with the notion that a teacher has to be somebody trained in a teacher's institution or whatever those colleges we call them. But to imagine that a parent can be also an educator is still not yet within the mind frame of the crafters of the Education Act in this country. And therefore, what is happening in Kenya is that when we've spoken to people like the people who approve curriculums, I mean, I think right now there's a lot more warmth when it comes to home educators simply because of the COVID. I think by virtue of the fact that many people are now at home, it has brought to the forefront the reality that, wow, many parents are now rethinking, why actually do I pay all this money to this school? Or what exactly do these children really learn? Or some of you are even going to be amazed and wonder, wow, these teachers are a hero if they're able to teach all this. But right now, the challenge in our country is that we need to get to a point where, and this is why my wife and I have been very interested in gathering together people who have an interest in home educators to create some form of association, because the reality is that the government is stretched, doesn't even have the resources to be able to supervise some of these things. So the best thing that many people have done in the other parts of the world is to come together, form an association, and do self-regulation. So the members who make up the association then are able to register their curriculums there, and therefore any grading examinations are done there. Now, for your information, homeschoolers are as diverse as they are. There is no one size fits all for all home educators. Whole homeschoolers choose different curriculums depending on their needs, their child's needs. So that's another thing. And most of the curriculums that are used, and you can even find homeschoolers that use even national curriculums like the 844. But the thing with homeschoolers is that there are some who will want, remember, this is again choice. It's all a family choice. Some families will want their children to finally be integrated. That was the English word I was looking for yesterday. Some families start homeschooling for a few years, maybe the early ages, and then maybe want to integrate their children into secondary. So they will then choose the 844 curriculum so that when the child is ready to go to secondary, they can do the entry exams for secondary. There's some homeschoolers that choose to integrate their children at university. So they will find out what the university entry requirements are, and therefore they will ensure they work backwards and go through the curriculum that prepares that child for that university. For your information, ladies and gentlemen, today we have, at least to our knowledge, 3 home educators in Kenya that have finally gone to university. These are home educators that have been homeschooled from when they were young up to entry into university. So we have 2 in USIU and we have 1 in Strathmore University. There could be others that we might not know about, but those are the ones we know. We are part of a co-op, or what homeschoolers do is that they organize themselves in groups, small groups, so as to support each other, to do common things together, to be able to share resources together, also for their children to socialize with each other. So having said that, Paul, as I mentioned, I didn't need an hour to be able to do the introduction. I just needed to give an overview, then allow people to engage with us with the actual questions they would like us to address. I can see the chats. So somebody has said, I hope the presentation will be shared as well. Thank you for organizing. Charles, we are open to giving the slides. If you want the slides, Paul will be happy to share the slides with you guys.
Thank you.
Anything?
As we are waiting for questions from other members, I'd like to ask, what is the best time to start homeschooling? Is it from the beginning, when, like you said, from the birth, or somebody can choose along the way? Somebody is in class 7, then says, maybe with this post-COVID, I really don't think I need to take children to school anymore. What would you say about that? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Paul, for your question. What I would say is that first and foremost, the couple, both the parents must be on the same page about it. They must agree that that's the way they want to go. If one of you is in doubt, then you better not remove the child, because when the rubber meets the road and the tire is wearing out, the ramifications will be very tough, and especially the one who suffers is the child. So that's the first place, that the couple must be in agreement. And then the second thing is, if the child, say for example, we take the class 7, the child you're talking about, this child is old enough to know what it is they want, I think. So have a conversation with the child and say, this is what we think. Yeah, that maybe you do not go back to school, and the child gives you their input. Of course, at the end of the day, the parents probably know why it is, and hopefully many times let the reason of wanting to homeschool not be financial. because that might not be, I don't know, sustainable. What happens when you get money back? Then you send the child back to school. So it has to be a bit of a long term. So you tell the child, there has to be a decisive period. So you, maybe as Thomas had mentioned, you could start from before the child goes to kindergarten, then you agree to send the child to school in class 1, say for example, or you withdraw a child out of school for whatever reason, but there have to be timelines. You tell the child, okay, you're going, from now, then you're going to go into high school. You know, after class 8, you will sit, say for example, the class 8 exams, and then you will go into high school. Or we're going to go all the way, then you go into college. Yeah, of course, praying that all factors are held constant, but there have to be clear timelines. And that agreement, first and foremost, has to be between the husband and his wife. You have to be both agreed that this is the direction you want your family to take. I don't know if I've answered your question, Paul.
You're muted. Paul, you're muted.
I'm also getting distracted by the baby.
No, that's a good thing. That is the life we live.
Yeah, thank you very much. That answer is appropriate. One, you can engage them at a certain level. We need to know what you quantify, what it's going to take, and something like that. Somebody had asked, does it work for working parents? Do you require to be trained to be a homeschooler? Those are the first two questions.
I think the fact that you're, as Thomas mentioned, the fact that you're a parent, you love your child enough to know what it is they need and that I think is the certification. In other countries, they require that you're actually certified to teach. But here, what has helped is that the curriculum we use is pretty a do-it-yourself kind of curriculum, because it's very clear on lesson plans, you know, and they break it down day by day, day-to-day activities, what the child is supposed to do, and how long a quarter is, because it has four quarters.
4 or 3.
How many quarters? 4. Yeah, 4 quarters. 4 quarters in a year. 3 quarters. Well, yeah, it's divided into quarters, and at the end of every quarter, the child is tested to see if they have understood the concepts. So it's pretty straightforward. Yeah. Can working parents? Is it suitable for working parents? Why not? You could hire a tutor to becoming first. You as parents decide this is what we want. You involve the children. This is what we want to do as a family. You choose what curriculum, if it's 844, and as Thomas had mentioned during his talk, is this what we want our child to learn? And then, well, since probably one salary is not going to be able to put up our family, then you get a tutor, but the parents must participate fully in that education of their child, whether or not they're the ones driving it.
There's a question. I like Emily. Emily, I like your questions. Wow, they're coming fast and furious. and I like the fact that you're right. I don't think I have the patience to stay teaching children for more than 2 hours. And that's why we said, Emily, earlier, this is not for everyone. It takes, not every parent will have the patience to do this. And that's why there's nothing wrong if you feel you don't have that patience, and you might do more harm to the child than home educating them. Now, let's go back to somebody had mentioned earlier, I would love to hear the days like. How is your typical day as a homeschooler? I think this was a good question.
Well, we have a typical day. We have 4 hours of class time, so to speak. So we wake up, we get up. One thing that we were really passionate about, Thomas and I, is that we wanted our children to have enough sleep, to get enough sleep. So our children get up at 7. And when they get up at 7, we encourage them to make their beds. And please note the word encourage, yeah? We encourage them to make their beds before leaving the room, and then they tidy up. These days, especially began, we used if now the children take house, should be done by 8, then it's class. The older children to our eldest is in junior high, so he's more or less organizing what it is that he wants to do. Yeah, what is it that he wants to do? So between then those, of course, who are still young, if I'm able to, I take them. Otherwise, I encourage maybe the older one to spend time with the younger ones. Say, for example, the 16-year-old teaching phonics to the younger child. Yeah, so between 9 and noon is class time, whether with mommy or by themselves. And then at noon, they take a break. We have lunch. We say the Angelus at noon. Then we have the lunch break until about, normally at about 1, we have a small get together, did things make sense? And if they didn't, go back to replay, which until about the person, we have 6 children. So every day of the week belongs to each child. So on Monday is the eldest. On Monday is the eldest child. And so what that means, that child is the one who is more or less going to take care of the little brother. If they need to go out to walk, he will walk with him. He's the one who is going to help me prepare dinner. He's the one who's going to set the table for dinner. He's the one who's going to lead the prayers, things like that. So this one who is on duty comes to help me at 5:30. The others continue playing until 6. When they come in, take a shower at 6:30. We say the rosary at 7 o'clock. We have dinner. Yeah, then we have another get together after dinner or during dinner, and then we eat. We have quiet time after the get together where they can do whatever they want, either read a book, play an instrument quietly, or talk to each other, whatever it is. And then also on the day that belongs to that particular child, Thomas and I try to meet that child and set a weekly goal for them. Whatever it is the child is struggling in, what help they need, or just to hang out. And then, yeah, they're in bed. They go to bed by 9. The older one goes to bed at 10. And so that's a typical work day for a homeschooling family.
Paul, we will need your assistance. Once we had been logged out, I think our internet had thrown us out and we came back, so we've lost the chat.
Okay, I'll read.
Of course, I hope
I don't know whether you're there still. I'm on internet yangu. Yeah. Hello.
Why don't you use your telephone? I think.
Yeah, so I'll read for you the next set of questions. Somebody had asked, how do I, most people want to know about this integration. Like at some point you are talking about these 3 people. Wametoka tena. Are they there? Sorry, I think the speaker dropped brief kidogo. Let's wait for them to just come back. To come back. Yeah. In the meantime, we can hear some reactions. Are there people here who've tried homeschooling or who've been contemplating homeschooling? What I get from them is it's unique, and homeschooling is not necessarily, it doesn't mean you are going to do the 844 syllabus or whatever syllabus. We can come up with our own syllabus, and we choose how it's going to run, and that's what makes it unique for every parent. There was a question there to do with how do we ensure that they are like others or they integrate, and that's where they explained that we can we go with them to whatever we are doing, we engage them in with whatever work, business, everything that we are doing, so that it's like they are learning alongside us when we're going to church. And then the homeschoolers have some get-togethers or organizing activities together through which they end up learning and exchanging ideas. So oh yeah. I see you are back. I wanted to what I was saying is that there is a question to do with a question to do with how these people integrate at the end. How do they, like the 3 people you said they joined the university? What tests were used to admit them to the university? Or maybe something close to that is when they are in when they now want to go to workplaces or something like that, how do they get evaluated? Maybe that is what you can clarify for the time being.
Okay.
I think one of the things that we need to get out of is the box. Because you see, homeschooling is you do it without the box. And you see, many of us are inside that box. And the other day, I was reading, I like to read a lot the Google News. And in the States right now, they are employing people who have, without, asking for their university papers and things like this. And I suppose that is what we need to encourage, that we have to think without the box. That let's begin there. Then when you are, not thinking without the box, then, because you see, like, for example, ourselves, when we began to homeschool and the day-to-day, I went into it, my son is a student, and just the way it was done to me, yeah? So he listens to what I have to say. But over the years, attending conferences and reading about it, it is about, homeschooling is about an interaction. It's about what the child wants. And many times when people ask me, so what is it that you hope, what's your plan for your children? And I say, well, we're going to homeschool them until grade 12. And if they want to go to college, then we will do whatever the prerequisites that are needed for them to go to college. Okay? So I'm not saying that we got there overnight, but it's a matter of thinking without the box. What are the needs of my child? Thomas, I'll hand you back over to you.
Okay, on the other children, universities have entry requirements. The examples I gave are homeschoolers that use the national curriculum. So they did the 844 and they sat for the exams of 844. And so they used their 844 certificates as private candidates and passed the entry exam. exams, that's how they entered. So that's the answer to your question.
Yeah.
I think the other thing I've seen people asking is what kind of careers have people had as homeschoolers? Please remember something. Here in this part of the world, homeschooling is so young, super, super young. And probably I might say maybe as old as maybe 20 years. You can't compare it with homeschooling that began in the 19 I don't know what, in the early 20th century in the US. US has had, for example, the longest history of homeschool people, including the UK. I mentioned earlier examples, like at least when I see people asking about whether people will fit in or whether they will they will miss out on experiences. I work in a university, ladies and gentlemen. I see the product of the so-called children who've gone through the schools, the education system. What I see is most of these people, when they come to university, they will click and form cliques with their tribes, from their schools, from their religions. The Indians will walk around with each other. We work so hard to try and break that. So if you're telling me socialization, you tell me, what is that? Is that really socialization? If people have gone through an education system and are still thinking in their small minds, like in their village mind mentality or their race, that's not what I see when I see in a university. Now, if you meet homeschoolers, this is what you will see. A typical homeschooling child has no compartments. They don't think in terms of seeing other children in the lenses of you belong to this school. Whenever we take our children to play with other children from other schools, immediately the other children cluster together in their groups and want to talk about conversations about their teacher. So if you talk about teacher Mwangi in your school, you exclude all other people, yet they cannot have conversations that have substance, that can bring in others. So you see, that's why I challenge this question people raise about socialization, and I push it back to you. And I ask the question, who determines socialization? And if socialization is conforming to be like everyone else, then I don't want my children to have that. I want my children to be free thinkers. Now, at the end of the day, remember what I said. Some of the things we'll share and the reasons that people choose to homeschool will sound weird to you. And I think that's what Hedaya is challenging. The reason, and we had to go through this mental shift, is because if we started looking at homeschooling from our education eyes, the way we had been educated ourselves, we would not have made the decision to homeschool, because it's a totally different world. It does not use the same parameters as you're using, the way you define it here. A child is successful because they got an A. A child is successful because they're able to play with their friends. And there is no statistics that shows. We have global statistics. If any of you is interested, go and check the national research on homeschooling. It's an institute in the US. You will find that, and I put that slide earlier, in the US, homeschool children outperform public school children by 1 to 1.5 times. There's a higher chance that a homeschool child, if it's done well, will turn out more socially together than a child who goes through the other school systems. That is data in the US. Here in Kenya, don't ask us for examples, because we don't have anyone who's been homeschooled until they've gone to a career. We are still at the part where we have people who've been homeschooled and have gone to university. Now we're waiting to see, once these children finish university, what kind of people will they be when they now join the workplace?
There also, as he had mentioned, the Protestants have a longer history than we Catholics in homeschooling. And at least a few families that I have heard of these people who have already homeschooled, many times those children turn out to be entrepreneurs. Yeah, they because they are used to driving themselves, and that is the aim of homeschooling, that the child learns to drive themselves. That we are trying to raise thinkers, not wheelbarrows. Yeah, that they do not need mommy or daddy to be there for them to do their classwork. That they plan their day. For example, our 16-year-old, our 14-year-olds, our 12-year-old, they should be able to know tomorrow, this is what I want to do, math, English, and whatever. Yeah, there are some subjects I say, that one must be done every day, for example. Yeah, like religion, yeah, the catechism, something to do with the language arts, that we require that they try and do it every day. But the child drives their own schooling, so for example, and even education. Thomas and I are not going to sit there and say, why don't you take this hobby and make it yours? The children have their own interests. We, as their parents, are just the facilitators, the guides, to make sure that they get to whatever goal it is they have set for themselves.
Paul, any other
Thank
question?
you. There are two people who raised their hands. One is Beatrice Mulindwa. Still the hand is up. Maybe she can talk. Then I also saw Baba Sarah, Baba Sarah.
So we apologize, Paul, that we've missed all the other chats in the past, because when we come out, we apologize, but we hope we'll be able to cover them.
Yeah, I'll share some of them with you right now. So Beatrice, will you speak, please?
Yes. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, the Mundias, for your informative presentation. So from what you've presented, I can see that these families that do a lot of homeschooling, I won't say that they're ideal, but they're the kind of families we are all striving to be. So somehow I think, because you see, when the child goes to these other schools, they interact with children from diverse backgrounds. Okay, let's say even from what you would call, for lack of a better word, maybe weird families or families that are not, together. So how do we ensure that when we do homeschooling? Then also the other thing I thought about was that I guess it also works well where you have more than one child in a family, because if you have one child in a family and you're doing homeschooling, I think that for me would be a disadvantage, because even if you say that you give them all these opportunities when you go out, when you go to church, when you meet other people, but the opportunity for a person to meet, for example, if in a class you're 20 and you're meeting these people every day, getting a different experience every day, even for the child to even be able to understand and say that the teacher shouts at me, why doesn't she talk to me, mommy, like the way you talk to me? I mean, for my child to be able to make that distinction, I think that is what we're struggling with. How do we expose the children to these diverse circumstances that life has to offer? Thank you.
Beatrice, I love your questions, and thank you for your remarks. I must say a couple of things. One, even in the situation where a parent has one child, I think we mentioned earlier, homeschoolers organize themselves into what we call co-op or associations or support groups. Those support groups they play the function of the homeschoolers being able to learn together. So that is how homeschoolers tackle the aspect of a parent that might have one child. Now, you're also right, there's a lot of benefit, like we see it in our home. When we have 6 children, I tell you, it's division of labor. So we know that once the older children have learned the concept, they also can help us teaching the young ones. For example, the older ones can help listening to the phonics and how the other one is reading. But the fact that a person even has one child, we have many homeschooling families we know where they might have one child, but they leverage on the fact that homeschoolers organize themselves. They are always meeting weekly and sharing resources, sharing curriculum, sharing teachers, tutors. So that's the way that child would be cushioned. On the concern you raised about the exposure, that is common everywhere. It will happen to a homeschooler, it will happen to a child that is in a private or a public school. Now, of course, the difference that we have is that we have a bit more control in the kind of environment we create for the child. That's very true. But please, I want you to appreciate one thing, because it's come in a lot of the questions. Don't think that these children are locked up and are never out there engaging in the world. They're out there when they're playing soccer with other children, they are beaten thoroughly. They'll be punched in the face like others. So they also have an opportunity to experience these things. When they're out there doing their music, they will meet rough children from different families, and they will come and ask us, why is that child so mean? And we have to explain that not all families are the same, but we have to learn to live with everyone. So Beatrice, the reality is, whether you're a parent who's homeschooling or a parent that is in a private or a public school, the role of you as a parent is to always do your very best to inculcate the cultures, the values that you want. But you always have to remember at the end of the day, that child is a free will, has a free will. And no matter how much we put, we will never ever have full control of what the outcome they will be. So you pray for them every day. You do your best to create the best atmosphere in the home, even in a private or public school. I think those who are not even homeschooling can start asking themselves, what can I take away from today? Maybe I need to take a much more keener interest in my child's education content. What are they actually learning? Maybe I've not been taking that. Maybe I need to be more active to go and meet the teacher and find out more. I need to also find out a little bit about the philosophy of the school before I take a child to that school. You as a parent can do small things. It doesn't mean you have to be a homeschooler to do any of these things. But Beatrice, very good question.
Yeah.
Paul?
Thank you.
I don't know if we've answered the question.
I've sent you a chart for all the text file on all the charts.
Thank you.
Nimetuma kwa email na pia kwa WhatsApp. Now, there
Beatrice,
was Baba Sarah.
answer your question.
There was Baba Sarah who wanted to ask some question or to give a comment. I don't know whether he's ready. Baba Sarah.
I think he put it in the chat.
Oh.
Yes, Paul. I have wrote my question.
What are some of the challenges you have encountered when trying to have your children join school after homeschooling, bearing in mind that it's not common in Kenya? Well, these days, you know, with when I think it's Matiang'i or this Magoha who is there now, what they have done is they have formed this body, the Kenya National Qualifications Authority, the KNQA. So what they have done is that KNQA, what they do is after your child has sat the whatever exams that they have sat, say for example, like we are using an American curriculum. So at the end of his grade 12, we take that, his a transcript?
Yeah.
His transcript to KNQA, and KNQA will convert that into the Kenyan grades. They have their whatever it is that they do, but they convert it. And then this child then is able to take that, the result slip from KNQA, the conversion from KNQA, and take it to whatever university he wants to attend. I don't know if I have answered that question. Yeah, so that is I think the beauty that has come up now, you know, with the KNQ, with this body that the government has formed. So it's up to the parent then to work towards, you know, achieving the subjects or whatever it is that the child, that are a prerequisite or that are needed, the credits that are needed for this person to be able to join university or college or whatever it is that they want to do. When does homeschooling work or not work? I think we've covered it earlier. The parents have to be in sync. They have to be speaking the same language, because if they're not, then that already is a recipe for failure. And then of course your children have to be, there has to be order and they have to be obedient. In fact, the school that where we get curriculum from is that one of the things they say at the beginning when you want to homeschool is that your child has to at least listen and obey. Yeah, they have to be able to listen to you, because can you imagine a child who is not listening? You tell them to come and they go the other side. Yeah, so that is necessary. If I don't know if I suppose as
if the home environment is, for lack of a, so for example, if there's so much lack of peace, lack of peace in the home, that cannot be a very conducive environment for a child. That child might be better off in a place where they actually influence outside the home. So I think those are some of the things, but I think the general thing is what my wife has mentioned. If there's no, homeschooling requires a plan. It's like a business. It's like you have to plan, have a strategy and say, okay, this is our philosophy, these are our values, these are our non-negotiables. and then you speak together. Let me tell you, we had so much pressure when we chose to homeschool, from society, from our own parents. We come from families where both her parents are teachers. So you can imagine, from top schools, and they were thinking, are you mad? What exactly are you thinking? Until they came to some of the activities of the children. You know, sometimes you can say so much about, oh, this homeschooling, does it work? Until you meet the actual products of the homeschooling, then that tells you whether the thing is really working or not. And when the parents came and met them performing in a concert, performing in a play, and have been with them, we've just come from home recently from Kilifi. I'm telling you, the parents were blown away. They sang songs to them, they've entertained them. What have we seen? They have a very healthy relationship with adults. And that's what you don't see a lot with children, mostly in other education systems. You find that just with there are other similar small people like them, but when you put them in an adult, they can't even have a conversation. And that's one thing we've seen as a benefit. So that's when it works, is when the two of you are pulling together, when you have a clear direction of what you have. It works when you have a support group, I must tell you. Let me tell you guys, it was very lonely when we began. It helps when you have other families that you can talk to. The women can sit together. My wife can have long 2 hours of therapy with other women just to go through what is going through. It also helps, ladies and gentlemen, when my biggest role, you must be wondering, what exactly do I do? Seems my wife does most of the education. My biggest role is I'm the biggest champion, the biggest supporter of my wife. I have to validate her, and I also have to protect her from people outside. So anybody who challenges her, and I tell them, you go through me, because this thing is ours, it's not hers. And so my biggest role is to let her know that she's doing a great job, and telling her, I'm here with you. Occasionally, I'll do some subjects. But I can tell you there's a benefit as a father. When you come home, those of you who know this, the mother can be pulling her hair, what, going mad. Immediately, you've noticed something happens, like in a poll, and the other fathers know. When the father walks in, order is restored. And even if you've not even said anything, that is important, to support the mother, to validate. I have to sometimes come and tell the children, you have to listen to your mother, you have to respect your mother. If you don't listen to your mother, you're not listening to me. So that's my role, to reinforce, to validate, to support her, to also give her adult conversation. At the end of the day, she spends most of the day with the children. My job is to put away whatever has gone on in the day and to spend there to listen to her. Let her have a moment to download her fears, her worries, her concerns. And whenever any family member wants to challenge our homeschooling, I speak as the head on behalf of the family and tell them we know what we are doing. Just watch this space.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to relate with your reasoning, because most people are wired to think that we take children to school so that they get jobs. Apparently, that should not be the case. We should develop problem solvers. We should develop people who can themselves create jobs. And homeschooling offers a very rich opportunity for that, because people are not put into rote learning and just the common thing where everyone one size fits all and all such things. I find it personally, I was doing well in school, but I'm one of those biggest critiques of schooling system. It just doesn't seem to be solving the problems. And I want to believe that homeschooling, and as you said, every couple or every home can have their own unique way of administering it, and it can develop the new leaders that our economy now needs, that our society needs today. The other thing is, it helps also to protect children from the aggression that we see outside today. We see so many interest groups who want to pump some philosophy into the children. And most of that we don't really agree with, like the CSE and all these LGBT things and such like stuff. So I think it's a rich thing, and we need to throw away the box, as Haida is saying. We throw away the box and start thinking afresh. Schooling is not about getting jobs. It's not about going being number one in school and things like this. It's about development and child development. That's very good. I don't see any new question, and I'm just wondering if there are people who have some comments or questions so that they can speak. Then we can have a close.
I would
Yes.
just like to say something, Paul, if I may.
Thank you. Yeah.
Should anybody here decide that they want to homeschool, maybe using a curriculum that is not the 844, although even that one is, curriculum, to always to give the curriculum, to have a priest look at that curriculum, especially if it calls itself a Catholic curriculum. Have a priest look at the curriculum. Yeah, because there's some curricula out there that would be detrimental to that child, especially as far as their faith and morals are concerned.
And you have Father Muituria there,
I-
Paul.
Yeah.
You have Father Muituria there, Father Anthony Muituria.
Oh, yeah, for the Anthony.
Yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
one. You can ask him. He would be a very good resource to confirm to you whether the curriculum is aligned to our faith.
Thank you very much.
Which one
And
is?
then, and then somebody has a hand up. That is Lillian Chimuma. I don't know whether she practices homeschooling in the US. Lillian, you will speak to Skie.
No, thank you. So thank you so much. Actually, I thank you, the Mundias, for the wonderful presentation. I enjoyed it a lot. So I just wanted more like a comment. I'm very impressed by you guys that you're able to do it in Kenya. I think a lot of people haven't picked up on this. In the US, we have 4 kids. And I didn't think about this earlier, but because of our circumstances every day, and especially with the COVID-19 challenge, I kept thinking, I wish I could be able to do homeschooling, but I can't. So what I do is I try to, the good thing, they don't go to school for a long time, like back home. So they do the public school. And because of our circumstances, I'm not able to do the full homeschooling, but I do integrate pieces of homeschooling. So it's a different way of just making sure that the kids still get what we hope, the values that we hope them to have, the principles that we hope them to have. For example, on Sundays, we would always make sure that when they go to school or when they have other functions that are going on for church programs during the week, I try to take them there. And when I sit down with them at the end of the day, I try to tell them, our eldest is now almost 7. So he's starting to understand life. So we are trying to make sure that, he knows how to say his prayers. So it's important. Yes, you did your reading, you did your homework, but it's also important to say your prayers. It's important to think about how God fits in all of this, Yeah. So finding those pieces. So even because I know with current, like here, homeschooling is actually recognized, and it's a very good thing for those parents who are able to do. Very successful indeed. I think you hear sometimes the negative stories about people who are shooting and doing crazy stuff, but that's not everyone. The public school has actually its own really issues that are very critical, and I don't know, they just make life really challenging. You don't want your kids to do that or to know that. So finding that balance for us, we've made a decision to try and find a balance from early on where they can still have that background of understanding that what is important to them, because they'll meet those things out there, which I think some people mentioned they want their kids to do, but you don't want them to just pick up everything, right? Even we know as grown-ups, yes, we are in a free world, but you don't want to just pick up all the dirt. You want to be able to know what is good and what is not good. So having the principles to pick those things up, what is important, what is not. It takes kids a long time to understand. And school is a crucial part. Here, some people, life gets really busy. You don't have time to even sit down with your kids. So if you don't find that space, that's where sometimes you'll hear parents, their kids did something and they have no idea. And it's actually true, they have no idea, they can't even believe it. Small mistakes. I'm giving them everything they need, but you're not being there for them or giving them what they actually need to grow up, which is that foundation. So that's my comment, but thank you so much.
And Lillian, we must say you're a hero.
Yeah.
I mean, that is amazing. You're a hero.
I don't know if I am. I'm kind of in the midst of chaos. You can hear the noises. So.
No, in fact, all that chaos is the beauty of life, because there are many people, Lillian, who are looking for that noise in the background. We thank God that you, even whichever small way you're able to incorporate and integrate our faith, is still something valuable. And I always tell something small is better than nothing. So our encouragement to everyone here is that you might not take homeschooling in its fullest scope. But in any small way, you can start being a bit more involved in your child. And remember, your children, what they need from you more than anything is just your affection, your acceptance of them, who they are. Even if they score a D, is to embrace them, to remind them that they are a person much more bigger than the grades. And that's what parents we need to do. And I think is what Paul was saying. Stop. The minute we begin interacting with our children as human beings and appreciating them for who they are and remembering they have talents and values that were created by God. Remember, every child you look at today when you go home is in the image and likeness of God. So imagine every day you have a walking images of God around you. How do you treat God in your home? So that's what I tell parents. Take it so serious to want to take care of God in your home. And that God is not only just graded by A or B or C or 20 points. It's marked by the fact that they're going to spend eternity in heaven.
Somebody had actually asked that if I choose today that I'm going for homeschooling, what other steps, or what is the next step? What's my next step?
I think the simplest thing I'll tell that person is, let me put our contacts here. The first thing I'll tell that person, I'm not able to share. Paul, enable me to share the screen.
Oh,
I just want to put our contacts here because some people have already asked for our contacts. I would suggest for that person, the first thing you want to do, if you're the only one who's made the decision, first you've got to ask yourself, if you're in a marriage where you also have a spouse, you need to make sure, you see, you might be at different levels. You might have gotten it, you're up there, but your spouse is not there. So the first step is to always make sure that the other one is aligned. And it might help for them either to listen to this recording, or you can have our contacts and we can have a chat about that. The most important step is to make sure that both of you are aligned. Then the next thing that follow is try and get an association. We already have one around. So if you want to be part of the association we are in, the co-op, you can then also join the association we have. That way, then you have people to work with you and help you answer the questions you have. Within there, you'll have every questions around what is the best curriculum, what do I do with my child when they have this? But I think the first thing is to make sure that both of you are aligned. I think that's what's most important. So I'm just going to put our contacts on the screen. So there are our contacts. Those who would like to, it's his and hers, as you can see there.
Yes, let everyone write it down. These people will be more resourceful along the way as you contemplate this. Maybe you attended this alone, you are not with your spouse, you want to go and discuss, you can call them along to help. Another thing is, we have this video on YouTube. You can always go back and watch it again. We'll share a link. And you can always reach us for more. Yeah. So is there any other question, any other person whose question is going unanswered? Because I think we are as good as done. Maybe just to share one more thing about our upcoming programs, just briefly, and then we have a closing prayer. As I said, for people who came a little later, this is St. Paul's Family Life Group. Every last Friday of the month, we have some activity. We have such like discussions on topics that are of help to families. So one is on the 12th, this is our webpage. It's family.stpaulschapel.nbi.org. Under announcements tab, you will see what is coming up. We are going to have a session by Dr. Stephen K. Karanja and Reverend Father Simon Gatimu. And it will be something to do with contraceptives and this natural family planning thing. Most people are misguided on this. And this usually is packed to the brim. Usually we have more than the Zoom is full, and so it will be on YouTube as well. This is the one that we had today, that we are having at the moment. Yeah, understanding homeschooling. And then just in case you have questions, you can always fill them in and send them to us, and even some suggestions that you have. And then for people who are preparing to get married, we have talks. Thank you, Thomas and Haida. I'm happy to know that you also run these talks. Maybe you will be joining us so that we do this better and together. We have hours coming in. This is the third one and the last one for the year, starting on 17th of September. Usually they take place on Thursdays from 6:15, and they take 8 straight weeks, every Thursday for 8 consecutive weeks. We have several topics that people go through, and we are requesting all couples to register here so that because we are going to conduct it on Zoom, so that we are able to liaise with them. So that is under announcements. And for people who want to know just which topics are going to be discussed, they are here. This is the third session. The first one is love and courtship. And then we have marriage as a sacrament. We have communication, all these things up to parenting. So these are some of the topics that we go through. And you can always share. Everyone is welcome to attend. And that means our next activity is going to be on 12th, which will be in the afternoon on a Saturday. We also try to organize such public lectures on a Saturday afternoon, which involves more people. And the next one is that which we have talked about. Otherwise, I'm very, very happy and grateful for you people, and for having taken your own data bundle and time and energy to share with us. I know God will bless you. I will keep praying for you. I will ask, I saw my friend Sarah Mitambo, fundi wa Mitambo, to say some last comments or compliment, and then a closing prayer. Sarah. Are you there? Ama ameponyoka. Simoni tena. Okay. Who is here whom Edna? You can say final words and prayer. Edna is there.
Hi, everyone. Let me take this opportunity. Sorry, my video is not on. Let me take this opportunity to appreciate Mr. and Mrs. Mundia for the wonderful session. It's really insightful for a number of us who are interacting with this for the first time. And I think it is something that is worth thinking about, worth giving some more time and effort now that we want to own everything that goes into developing our children. I also want to thank Paul on behalf of Family Life for organizing this, and I hope we'll be able to have more sessions like this. I also want to appreciate each and every person who was present here with us, and I want to wish you a wonderful and blessed night. Now let's bow our heads for a word of prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Father, we come to you this evening with the hearts full of thanksgiving because you've been great to us, because of your mercy, because of your grace. We want to thank you in a special way for our facilitators for today, Mr. and Mrs. Mundia. We want to pray that you'll continue to bless their family, bless their desires, bless them with more wisdom even as they go out into the world to educate other parents on what is possible. We want to thank you for each and every person present here and all the families represented, that you continue to bless them that you continue to grant us wisdom and the power of the Holy Spirit to be able to discern what is good for our children and the courage to pick it up and run with it. We want to thank you in a big way for our country, and we want to pray that even the decision makers and our leaders will be able to influence decisions that will help us mold our children to what God would love to see in our children. We thank you, we give you honor and glory, and we pray all this in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Pray for us.
Thank you very much, everybody, and I'm very happy and grateful. I welcome you to all our upcoming activities. Be part of us, and Thomas and Mo and Haida will be very, very glad that when you join us to be part of our usual programs.
Paul,
Thank you.
thank you, Paul, for inviting us. We are very honored we could be here, and thank you to everyone who was able to make it. It has been a pleasure, and we are praying for you also and all your families for God's blessing. Thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone, thank you very much. Share it. I've put the link to the YouTube for people who didn't get. Yeah, I've invited everybody. People who are saying I invite them. Otherwise, you can send us an email, because I may not be able to remember everything. But when you send an email, I'll be able to somewhat remember. I'm just putting our email there, family@stpaulschapelnbi.org. That's our email address, and we will always be in touch. Otherwise, blessed evening. Yeah, you can now. Lilian, asante sana.
Oh, bado niko hapa. Asanti sana. Thank you. Nimeshukuru leo umeongea Kiswahili.
Mimi huongea
Wacha
Kiswahili.
bwana. Nikwambia ufundisha watoto Kiswahili, wewe unaongelesha Kizungu.
Lilian, acha uchokozi.
Okay, bye. Oh, bado kuna watu. Sorry, I get used to
Duty
this.
calls. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening. Yeah, people live at pleasure. Is this